Let us try to understand what are improper and mixed fractions. Well, fractions is what? Fraction is part of whole, right? So we say fraction is part of whole. This is one thing we know about it. So when it is part of whole, it has to be smaller than 1, correct? Yes, it should be. Now the other thing we learned about fraction is that fraction can be written as something which is we call numerator divided by denominator, right? Where numerator is number of parts and denominator is whole is divided into equal number of parts, how many of them. So that is what denominator is, and their ratio is actually a fraction, right? So when we normally write a fraction, we have number of parts on the top and total number of parts in one whole is written in the denominator, and therefore we get a number which is less than 1, right? Now there are situations when we can land up into fractions which are greater than 1. So that is what brings us to improper and mixed fractions, and that is what we are going to explore now. Okay, so here are a few examples. What I've done here is that I have one set of figures here and the other set just below them. So what I will do is I'll consider two at a time. So I will consider these as sets. So I'll consider these 2's at one time. So this becomes one set, that's the next set, another set, and this is the fourth set. And we will see how do we get proper, improper and mixed fractions, right? So let's think like this. In this triangle, I have divided this into 4 equal parts, correct? If I shade one of them, then I get a proper fraction which is 1 out of 4. Since the whole figure is divided into 4 equal parts, right? If I shade all of them, then what? Then it is 4 over 4, right? So there are total 4 parts and I shaded all 4 of them, which is kind of one whole, right? Now let me go further. This is a similar triangle, exactly same, and I shade one more 1/4. Now the question is, how many 1/4s do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Do you see that? So now I have 5/4. Do you see that? And if I see the figure, I can also see that as one whole and 1 out of 4. You get it? That is what is improper and mixed fraction. This one is mixed since it has a whole number along with a fraction. Both are mixed. And this way of writing is improper since the number of parts are more than number of parts in one whole. Now you got the trick. We don't have one whole here. We have 2 wholes, right? But we talk in terms of only one whole, and therefore we get into mixed fractions and improper fractions, right? So improper because the fraction numerator is greater than denominator. Mixed because it has both parts, whole number and a fraction. Do you get it now? So that is how we get improper and mixed fractions. Let's do it once again, right? And you help me this time. Let us say I shade a couple of them, and let me shade, and you have to write them in fractions. So how many did I shade? 1, 2, 3. Out of how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I shaded 3 out of 8, right? So you got 3 out of 8, which is a proper set. Now 3 out of 8 is a proper fraction, since it has a numerator which is lesser than denominator. We shaded 3 out of 8 equal parts. Now, What I do here is I shade the whole figure. That means 8 out of 8. Do you see there are 8 equal parts in this? And I shade them all. So this becomes 8 out of 8, correct? Now if I add them up, that means if I add them up, what do I get? How many 8s? 8 here and 3 here. So that becomes 11 8s, right? So we get 11 8s. Now 11 8s become improper fraction. Do you understand? Because my numerator is greater than denominator. Reality is that we are talking about 2 wholes, not 1. But when we write, we think about only 1. That is why we get into improper and mixed fractions. The other way of writing this is 1 whole, right? 1 whole and the fraction 3/8. And this way of writing is called mixed fractions, since we have mixed whole numbers with the fractions. I hope now the idea is absolutely clear to you, right? Let's take one more example. Now this time I will shade 2 of these. And in this case, let me shade all of them except 1. So I'll leave 1 and then shade all of them. And you have to tell me, how can I write this as improper fraction and as mixed number? Can you write? Figure it out. How will you write this as improper fraction and as mixed fraction? Okay, let's first go for improper. Improper means numerator should be greater. So how many is each? I have to shade all but 1. So let me shade all but 1 in this case, right? And then let's figure it out. There are how many triangles here? Equal triangles in a hexagon are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So this regular hexagon has been divided into equilateral triangles, 6 in numbers, and all are exactly same. Now how many 1/6 do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. So the improper fraction is 7/6. Do you see that? Now my numerator is more than denominator, so the total has to be more than 1. Now 7, what I can do is I can bring this here and fill this up. So it becomes 1 whole, right? And I have left with 1/6. So that becomes a mixed fraction. So that is another way of looking into it. Do you see that part? Isn't that beautiful? It is. And now the last is a problem for you. Now in this case, we will assume that all these triangles are equal, right? So that is our assumption, that all of them are equal, correct? Now I'm shading some of them. You have to write them on your own as mixed fractions and improper fractions, okay? That is an exercise for you. Let's see if you get it right. So what I'm doing here is, I'm not even telling you how many I'm shading, but I think I've shaded half of them. Is that so? Did I shade half of them? It looks like yes. And in this case, I will shade more than half. So if I shade more than half, then we have improper fraction, right? So that becomes half of it. Is that okay? And I'm shading more than half. Do you see I'm shading more than half? Yes, I am. So now that is the portion which has been shaded. You have to write this as improper and mixed fractions. So that is an exercise for you. Imagine that all of them are equal triangles. So here we have a whole divided into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 parts. So denominator should be 8s. And you have to count how many numerators and write down the answer. Thank you and all the best.